Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Connect Conference 2021 Day 4, brought to you by Huawei.
Greetings and thank you to Juanita and the Digital Council Africa for the opportunity to participate in this rather important discussion connecting the township economy, looking at a case study in and around that subject. So let me just introduce everyone. First of all, myself, Andre Hoffman. I am founder and CEO of an entity called MyTechie, which is a gig economy digital skills marketplace and platform for local communities. More like a technician as a service, if you like. I've spent the last 40 years of my life in this industry, telecommunications, working in companies like Telkom, Broadband, Infraco, Link Africa, overseas for a while. So used to the telecoms industry and now trying to ply my trade in the gig economy with a technology catalyst for economic empowerment. We have a distinguished and experienced panel today to discuss this subject. So let me introduce everyone. We'll start with Andy. Andy Searle is the CEO and CEO of Business Process Enabling South Africa. He has a strong background in management, having consulted and worked for leading global and local firms. He has played an active role in the growth and development of the global business services sector in South Africa, and his involvement includes initiatives to implement skills supply chain in the country and to ensure a sustainable supply of skilled people for jobs in demand, and initiatives to create an environment in which the workforce can be upskilled, reskilled, and future skilled. To increase, obviously, our competitiveness. He's passionate about the power of people in business performance and believes in a correlation between the world of sport and work. Andy has a BCom, HD, and an MBA. Actually, Andy, I was just attending the University of YouTube recently, and I came across a saying, I found out that the United Nations and the World Bank estimate that human capital, being education, skills, and experience, accounts for more than half of the wealth of most countries. And I think you will agree, our country particularly has a very young population, and definitely I see it as an opportunity for us to leverage that youth and develop that as a skills platform for the rest of the country. So welcome to the panel.
Andre, thanks very much indeed. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Also on the panel, we have Tim. Tim Andrews is part of the team at Harambee, Youth Employment Accelerator. He's a digital enablement exec. Do you abbreviate that to DEE? No. Anyway, he leads various enablement functions at Harambee's work, aiming at closing the various skills gaps in the digital ecosystem in South Africa. Some of his work includes the establishment of DigiLink Digital Delivery Academy and various township remote worker enablement projects, which I'm sure we will hear about today. Tim holds an honours degree in investment management from the University of Johannesburg. Tim, welcome to the team.
Thank you. Thanks. Nice to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Mark Essie, CEO of Capability BPO. He has an extensive fintech background, financial qualifications, operational experience in the fintech and banking sector. Founded Debt-In, which is now Capability Working Capital Solutions, and he sees the need to expand the offerings into the broader business process outsourcing markets, both locally and abroad. His key focus is bringing the human touch to the BPO sector with the purpose of encouraging effective communications, making the connection and rewarding engagement every time. He's driven and passionate about making a positive impact on people's lives in the greater South Africa. He has a BCom degree and a BCom honours degree, and has passed the CIMA, Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, board exam. Mark, welcome to the panel.
Thanks, Andre. Real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I think just for the audience, let me put a disclaimer out there, acknowledging that, first of all, we as a bunch of privileged white guys are wholly, probably unqualified to be talking about this township economy subject from anything more than an outside point of view. However, that said, we're not blind or unconscious to the dichotomy that is our situation. And we have enough passion and belief in our country and its people that we want to definitely make a difference to our future. So let me just quickly contextualize the problem that we're dealing with, and the case that we want to try and accomplish. You've all heard of the digital divide. It's a term that's bandied about fairly ubiquitously these days, and it really does showcase or highlight the inequalities that we face, particularly in physical access to technology, as well as the imbalance in resources and skills that we need to effectively participate in the fourth industrial revolution, or the industry 5.0, whatever you want to call it. And this pandemic that we've just experienced over the last, 18 months or so, has definitely amplified the need for us to be able to work remotely and to be able to access opportunities through the medium of broadband. The country itself, the National Development Plan, intends that by 2030, 90% of the 11 million jobs that are created in the South African economy should be created by small enterprise sector. It's envisaged that in order to achieve this target, small enterprise would need to create approximately 49,000 SMME jobs at a growth rate of 20% per annum. So this has been placed at the forefront. You've heard it many times at States of the Nation addresses by presidents current and past, budget speeches, and these kinds of things that we get told fairly regularly. Townships, of course, they tend to be urban, but they're very disconnected in many respects. And if you look at them, they're often the destination of choice for migrants that are seeking a better future. They provide a lot of scope for informal business. There's a lot of hustle that happens there, a lot of entrepreneurship. But unfortunately, it's a lot about control, and often it's control of access in particular. Scarcity tends to breed certain extortionary behavior. Lack of access to affordable internet connection means that if you want to submit a CV for a job, or you want to attend a training course, an internet cafe can be quite extortionary in terms of pricing to desperate people. There's also the case of township mafia. They're legendary. The self-appointed gatekeepers of local economies, and they have their own agendas and create significant negative effects, particularly on the industry that I work in, to get infrastructure installed in some of these places. So there are challenges. And it's not only that. If you think about getting to work these days, transport costs can be as high as 40% or more of your income at that level. And it's not just the cost, it's the time it takes to get into public transport. I know people that start at 5 o'clock in the morning and only get home again at 7 p.m. at night. So, it's not really conducive. We see malls going up in townships, and you have to ask yourself, well, where's the money flowing? You understand the circular flow of income. And what is happening is that crowding out local investment. So there's things that we can do maybe a little differently to increase the beneficiation of what we're taking into townships. And obviously this pandemic, you can ask yourself, well, has it made it worse? Has it amplified or aggravated the situation? It's here from some of the people that have been doing stuff successfully in the townships. And hopefully we can find a way to drive more inclusivity, that we can bring more beneficiation to the local communities. So let's start off with Andy. Tell us, Andy, from your point of view, why you're on this panel, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what have been the inhibitors in your view, and where do you think we're going with this thing? Over to you.
Andre, great. Thanks very much. I'm going to do that by sharing a few slides as well as I speak. So if you can just give me one moment to pop them up. And there we go. And hopefully you can see that now clearly on the screen. So in my role in BPESA, one of the objectives that we are really closely focused on is driving growth in the export sector. And that's because of its economic impact and its impact on youth unemployment by creating new youth jobs. And we appreciate that to date, we've not really utilized and accessed the talent pools in the townships anywhere near to the level that we should, and therefore have a tremendous amount of potential to unlock if we're going to scale this sector to achieve its full potential. Now, there's great growth potential in the global business services sector, and for those who are not familiar with what that includes, we're talking about call centers, we're talking about back office work, we're talking about research, digital and IT outsourcing work. There are a range of services that fit into this sector we call global business services. What you see in front of you is a growth path that we've been on, a sector which has been growing in its export subsegment at over 24% per annum. And we have bold objectives to achieve the addition of 100,000 new jobs in the economy by the end of 2023, and a total of 500,000 of these export jobs by the end of 2030. COVID did have an impact, but we certainly are getting back towards that growth path. And the kind of work that South African companies are winning is across a broad range. We, first of all, that work is sourced from markets like the North American market, the UK, Australia, the rest of Africa. And that's a lot of the customer service type work, which my panel colleagues may talk more about. We also have in South Africa depth and breadth of capability in, for example, legal services, finance and accounting, HR outsourcing, and many others. And we have a strong ICT and digital capability in South Africa, but not necessarily organized to externalize those services to benefit from the offshore growth opportunity. And excitingly, on the right-hand side, we also have this emergence of new personalized and social services, which lend themselves to individual contracting as well as working through companies to deliver them in more of a gig type economy model. And importantly too, we would love to see a lot of work that's previously been offshore brought back to South Africa. So the opportunities are there. We've got challenges that can confront us in exploiting these opportunities. And I think the one most relevant today is, if we look at the weaknesses in that summary, it's the insufficient digital access to learning and working opportunities, particularly for excluded communities. And that includes some of the townships within the metropolitan areas, but also further out. And that's really where our talent lies. And the talent pool in South Africa is deep and very effective. And if we look at those strengths, one of them there is the skills and attitude of the workforce in South Africa, which over the years has led us into the #1 position as the most preferred offshore destination for BPO outsourced services. So there's a lot in our favor, but we have to tackle the issue of connectivity and unlocking access to the township and the township economies as a matter of urgency. Now, you asked about the COVID pandemic. Well, in our experience, what's happened over time in response to the pandemic is a very quick shift of work from on-premise to a blended model of on-premise and work from home. And to date, we have an average of 38% of the entire workforce working from home. So it's a precedent that's established, but at the moment it's limited to where bandwidth is suitable. People have access to the right end user equipment. It's secure. The ergonomics of the working environment are right. But the point I want to make here is that we've shifted very quickly into this blended model, which has now become the norm. So if we then think about the growth opportunity, it's future for us, the fact that we've already got established work from home models, and we start to think about how do we assist the township economy? How do we unlock the township economy in particular? There are a number of options coming out through research that's been conducted across many provinces in the country. So these aren't a complete list of options, but the ones that are certainly enjoying the most discussion and interest at the moment, and you'll hear the case studies talk to them. So the one is working from home. So long as you have good connectivity, it's secure, it's reliable in terms of also your power infrastructure, and you can work safely in a relatively good ergonomical environment, you can work from home. The other shift we've seen is that organizations, in order to make the workplace more accessible to their staff, are setting up operating sites in townships. And one, it reduces the cost of transport for their staff. Two, it makes them, puts them right in proximity to those talent pools, and we're starting to see more and more of that. The third is to prepare plug and play sites in townships. And on the right, you just see a few examples through those pictures of the types of facilities that can quickly be converted with the right technical infrastructure, security, facilities, etc., into a site that's ready to go for a business operator to step in, take over a lease agreement, for example, configure it to their requirements, and then operate. And then this can be expanded into something that's more structured, like a digital hub, which could be incorporated into a community center, it could be bespoke, or even something on a larger scale like a BPO park. So there are a number of different ways in which this can be made to work. Now, there are clear benefits of taking the global business services work to the townships, and you can see them listed in the table on the left-hand side, and opportunities to exploit. And this is what makes it not just important for us to try and get right, but attractive to the operators who look at these benefits and in that opportunity see a way of creating a diversified footprint, dealing with some of the attrition and staff risks. You know, if you move into the big intensified areas of our operations, you face this high levels of saturation and concentration risk, and it pushes costs up. So there are many reasons why people would want to move there from a commercial point of view, but the most important is to access the talent pool that is accessible in those areas. But there are challenges that need to be addressed, which I know we'll discuss in more during the course of our conversation. You know, some of the limitations deal with insufficient incentives to attract businesses there, but I think much of the work being done at the moment is trying to address that. Safety and security, and you talked a little bit earlier about some of the issues like the township map here. It's in creating more of an enabling environment if you're setting up a concentrated operation like a hub or a BPO park, but that's not necessary if you're working remotely from home, because those services and supports are centralized. Power and electricity issues, the infrastructure which needs to be addressed. Those are the types of things that can be addressed, but they, in many instances, prevent barriers or limitations. And then, of course, there are risks that the operations won't be successful. But I think when done in conjunction with communities, and this is about compacting with all the social partners, setting everybody up for success, bringing in business, government, social partners, the communities into driving the work into the townships very, very successfully and creating that access. So in closing, you know, the point I'd like to make, not just from the perspective of the global business services sector, but more generally, is we have to get this right. The rewards for inclusive growth are high and worth every effort and resource. So just by example, because there obviously are many sectors of the economy that have a direct bearing on the opportunity and the importance of township economy work. But with the global business services sector in 3 years, let's have a look at what sort of impact it can create. So first of all, we've seen participation in companies grow by 467%, 476%. And the more small organizations and others that can become part of this growth opportunity, the better. Many of them could be located in these townships. The second is that there's a huge impact on our economy. Over 19 billion rands worth of export revenue alone has been contributed to the South African economy just since 2018 by the companies in our sector. And they've created over 50,000 new jobs. And we're not even looking at the secondary jobs, you know, to which we could apply a multiplier of perhaps 1.5. And those separate secondary jobs occur in the supply chains. And when you're thinking about locating work in the township, you also locate the related support services in the same area. So the benefits are greater than just the direct jobs that are created there. And then I think when we have a look at the income that then would find its way back into those township economies, entry-level salaries start at about 4.5, but they go up quite quickly, and they go up quite high as well. And that money then would circulate straight back into the township economy, together with the supply chain income. And the key beneficiaries of these types of initiatives, certainly if we reflect on the sector's performance to date, are firstly youth. 86% of those new jobs have been for people under the age of 35. 65% of those jobs are for women. And this is a great way of reaching women, particularly, single parent households where the woman has to bring up the family as well as work and can work from home or work much closer to home. This represents a great opportunity. 94% of the work is for people of color. 10% of that growing membership base are for startups and micro enterprises, which tell you that this is a strong fit with the township economy. And this work is spread across most of the 9 provinces of South Africa. So we need to think carefully around how do we exploit South Africa's strong positioning on the global markets at the moment, this window of opportunity we've got through the next 5, 10, 15 odd years to really make the most of it, and to view the township economy as an incredible resource, talent pool, and vehicle to unlock growth at tremendous scale. So that's what I wanted to share from our perspective. And with that, Andre, back to you, and thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. That's really is a good story to hear. Encouraging to see the direct and the ancillary beneficiation of what you're trying to achieve. And it's very encouraging. But I should imagine it really is all dependent on the underlying broadband infrastructure. And I can't emphasize enough how important that is. We are speaking about the Digital Council here, which represents broadband and fiber, and the way that these kinds of opportunities can be leveraged, almost like the railways of the 20th century. And it's not just broadband in the sense of mobile, because that tends to be people tend to have a fear of downloading data because it costs so much. And ultimately, you need to get to the point where you've got a reliable, consistent broadband service that it's eat as much as you like, always on, ready to consume, and you can use that channel to provide income for yourself and generally your economic benefit without stressing about data. So thanks very much for that presentation, Andy. That gives us a segue into the next one. Tim, I'd like to bring you on board now. If you would like to share with us your case study, and if you like, I believe you've got a video to show us as well. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. So, I mean, a lot of what Andy has said, I think, we've sort of been working on for the last sort of 10 years of Harambee's history. We are a youth employment accelerator. We work with youth in trying to sort of unblock the barriers that they face every single day, barriers like exclusion, that sort of takes them away from some of the opportunities that we're all sort of used to. These barriers could be, access to network, financial sort of barriers that they face each day. But if you listen to Andy and what he's just said, there were a few things in there that stick in my head. And one of them is this amazing access that South Africa does have to an incredible workforce that has largely put us on the map when it comes to business process outsourcing, as I've just learned now, and made us a #1 destination around the world. That talent, if showcased and if invested in correctly, is definitely, as Andre was saying earlier, the key to this whole scale of South Africa, but also the unlocking of these new opportunities. Harambee spent the best part of sort of 10 years trying to work as an organization in the middle of very few opportunities, so economic opportunities for young South Africans, and then on the other side, a population of excluded youth, and largely we've worked from sort of the ages of 15 to 35 years old when we talk about youth, and trying to in a clever way, help young people pathway from from finishing school or leaving school and into some sort of learning or earning opportunity where they can be exposed to some sort of opportunity on their journey. The next sort of 10 years in our world looks a bit different. We could either scale the 6 centers we had around South Africa, We could, try and get more youth into our centres and close more gaps. Or we could, think about scale a bit differently and try and work with, industry bodies like you've heard Andy, and the BPO sector, and enable others, so that we can get this sort of multiplication effect when we think about opportunity for youth. Our next 10 years then is all about enabling sectors, enabling companies, enabling partners to really, or where there are opportunities, number one, I think is the most important thing, and really focusing in on those areas where we can, think about, is it an unblocking that's needed? Is it some investment that's required? But how do we actually catalyze those opportunities that often don't exist in very many sectors within an economy that's not growing as fast as we think it should be? Also, we're moving sort of from the manufacturing, thinking and reliance into a more services-orientated sector as well. So how do we unblock and enable those sort of sectors where high growth sort of exists for us? We hear every day about the 34%, I think it's even grown now, 34% unemployment rate in South Africa. But if you zoom in to the youth, 18 to 35-year-olds, we see, a much worse set of events, which is 18 to 35-year-olds, sort of 2 in 3 people are actually unemployed. So it's closer, to 65 to 70% of those young people are actually unemployed. Where we then, started to identify opportunities in the, in the space to unlock, so high growth industries, high growth sectors, these sorts of things. We've tried to unlock and unblock our thinking a little bit to try and say, where can we invest our time and really supersize some of these opportunities that can come in. 2 of those sectors, funnily enough, were the BPO sector, and that includes digital. When we talk about digital, there are vast amounts of jobs that are available to young people in both those sectors, provided we can give access to those sectors to those young people. And it was in those barriers, or these exclusionary barriers that we keep talking about. One very big barrier for young people, even if we can expose them to opportunities, whether they be online learning opportunities, places for them to develop, or even a gig, a piece of gig work, like we know about in the developed world. The biggest barrier for us in that space was, the access to internet, and the access to sort of a reliable device and some internet that's affordable. And it was within that thinking when the pandemic hit. You're going to hear from Mark just now, but many operators in the BPO sector, for example, overnight had to work out sort of how to enable large workforces of existing employees to try and get into a working environment where they, sorry about the call there, where they could continue to serve their customers, let alone trying to enable young people to do these sorts of things. And then if we listen to some of the statistics, Andy was talking about in a high growth sector like the BPO sector, and I'm using it as a great example. Many of the great talent that South Africa produces and travels into the main city nodes, all come from the township environment, and so this migration of labor into central places, with it comes the migration of capital. And so we were thinking, how do we start to think a little bit differently and maybe stop a bit of the migration, and maybe what could we enable if we allowed young people to work a little bit closer to the communities that they may come from. The other thought there was, if we could do this, how could we do it in a very practical way, where we crowded in the right sort of partners to test what it would mean to migrate work closer to where our workforce potentially lives, and what could the spin-off effects be, as far as opportunity goes, and the the spin-offs of what could happen if you moved it closer to these communities. Again, at the same time, the thinking was, there's no shortage of investment currently in the township. I'd argue that there's quite a few sort of white elephants, if we want to call them that. E-learning labs, entrepreneurial hubs that lie dormant in a lot of communities. And so the thinking again for Harambee, for us, and how we enable sectors or opportunities, we shone the sort of the spotlight a little bit on how do we create sustainable sort of solutions if we are to try and implement some of these solutions, and swim upstream a little bit to ensure that these things work. One of the things in there, and I'll talk about the 3 ingredients and then show a little bit of a video that I hope brings it to life. It's Notando's story. But one of the ingredients that's often overlooked is the ability to catalyze, or to catalyze real sort of meaningful and valuable work into the model. So it's one thing to build something, it's one thing to fund something, but if you cannot create the sustainable job or the sustainable opportunity, or the piece of work that creates the sustainable model, often you'll find that we get these sort of white elephant investments in these communities that don't move the dial. So that was a challenge to us as well. We had to think through very carefully before we put our mind and energy into that. So without talking too much more, I'm going to get to Notando's story, and just to say that it's a story about a partnership. We said we could either live on our concept notes for the rest of eternity, or we could phone up a bunch of CEOs and of some partner companies and put together a model where everyone pledges something, and see if we can create a sustainable model for 20 people. In this specific case study was in Jabulani and Soweto, but the challenge we set ourselves was, could we crowd in the right kinds of people and create a work from home environment that potentially could become a blueprint or a showcase for the work from home scenario in what we've been talking through. So I'll just say that and end off and then go into the case study. We took our partners at Vuma, who had some fiber backbone in Jabulani and Soweto. We said, what, could you guys help us connect 20 houses? We then spoke to one of the operators in Bepesa's world, a company by the name of Callforce. We said, do you have a campaign you can put into this opportunity? The campaign being, do you have 20 seats of outsourcing work that we could put in if we connect the internet? And then Harambee said, can we geolocate the right talent in Jabulani that would fit, off the National Pathway Manager SA Youth, that would fit the criteria, or would match on our Pathway Manager, would match to a call center agent that Callforce put forward. And at the intersection of those 3 things, the sustainability comes in on the seat job. So that person being paid for the work that they do. We then, went into a 5-week upskilling and deployed the fiber in a very lean and agile fashion. And to this day, and this was earlier in the year, to this day, the 20 young people that are working from home and you'll hear from Notando now, but are still working sustainably. And we are looking to now invite other partners, Mark included, in the BPO sector and in the tech sectors, to now expand this into Durban, Cape Town, and everywhere else. We'll talk a little bit about rural later, I hope, but we'll expand that outward. So I'm going to stop there, Andre, and just if I can play the video for everyone to just hear from Notando. I think she tells a better story than I do.
My name is Notando Villagasi. I'm 25. I live in Soweto at Dube. there's a lot of unemployment, especially with us, the youth. I live with my cousins and my daughter. My one cousin is disabled. He's the one that I'm taking care of while I'm at home. My daughter is Letoguhle. She's 2 years old. When I became a mother, I felt that I had now a reason to live. I was job seeking for basically 2 years. And then on the third year, that's when I got this opportunity. Fiber was installed in my house. And then I got a laptop. I got a headset, so I have a working station that is very convenient for me. Now I am a call center agent. My mother is very proud of me. She's just like a proud mother who has a responsible daughter she doesn't have to take care of.
How do we take more jobs into townships and communities? We formed partnerships with a range of organizations. Together, we are committed to get more young people connected and employed.
For us, it is very important that we enable our youth to do extraordinary things. For this initiative, we provided a free fiber installation and connectivity.
Callforce is a customer service call center, and we assist clients with their UIF queries that they need assistance with.
We focus on really empowering young people, especially young women. So we're trying to show them that they can make it in life and they can grow their careers while taking care of their families.
I'm loving my job. I'll be able to save. I'll be able to spend time with my daughter. I'll be able to spend time with my cousin. I'm loving my life right now.
Thanks, Andre. I hope that tells the story a little bit better than I did.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim. Love your work. That was a beautiful story. It really was. It really hits home, and it gives us a very good idea. So it was interesting too in what you said about how you've matched the proximity and the skill to what you needed in the market. These are the kinds of things we're going to need to go forward. The other thing you mentioned is the anomaly or the high levels of unemployment in the country, but are amplified in the youth. And I experienced the same thing during my period as an office bearer at the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers. So many people qualified, not getting work. And the key here is experience. Companies are wanting experience. So how do you blend that? How do you get that experience, bring it alongside maybe an experienced person, give the individual some work integrated learning opportunities so that we can dive deeper into that pool of talent, that talent pool of youth particularly, and give them a roadmap which gives them a sustainable future. So thank you very much for that lovely segue. We move now to Mark. Mark, it's your turn to tell us how you're going to make a difference.
Thanks, Andre. I love stories. I love those stories. I love seeing how people create opportunities for each other. I love seeing the spirit of what South Africa has to offer. So, Andre, Tim and Andy created great context for me to kick off. And where we're at, I'm going to share a little bit about the story and the journey that we're on. Part of it is reality and part of it is still in the conceptual phase. So I started in BPO about 13 years ago, and just by the nature of what we do and who we employ in South Africa, I think we fundamentally always connected into the township economy in some way, because that's where we draw most of our employees. But it was only about 7 years ago that I got introduced to Harambee, and what Harambee did for me, I thought they were going to come into my business as an enabler of young talent and a source of work readiness, people that had been through a work readiness program and that were ready to hit the floor. They did all of that, but what they also did is they sensitized me to some of the issues that young people from the townships were facing. Issues around transport, coming into a central hub, not having enough money to get to work in the morning. They'd start a job, and for the first 3 weeks, they'd hardly have any money to eat because all of that money was going, or never mind the first 3 weeks until they got their first paycheck, all of their money was just going into getting them to work and back every day. And together with Harambee, I started sitting down and speaking to them about what the issues were with people coming in from the townships and how we could help. So one of the first things I did is we were growing quite nicely and we needed new premises. And one of the things we decided to do was that we wanted to be one taxi stop away from any of the townships. Now, we're based in Durban. So what we did is we based our contact center in Durban Central. And for those of you that are not familiar with Durban, Durban Central is sort of the central hub for people coming in from the south, from the west, and the north of Durban. So if you're coming in from, let's say, Umlazi in the south, and you need to get to Umhlanga, you need to catch a taxi from Umlazi to Durban Central and then catch another taxi to Umhlanga. So what we decided to do is let's base ourselves in central Durban and we'll be one taxi stop away from everybody. What we then did is we immediately were able to, I wouldn't say cutting half the transport costs for most of our agents, but significantly reduce that cost. The CBD of a lot of South African cities are not really sort of prime real estate. And it was a difficult choice at first, but the benefits in terms of the talent pool that we were able to access, because we were now cheaper and more accessible to the youth from the townships, the benefits immediately started manifesting themselves. What I then wanted to do, and through working with Bepesa and again with Harambee, was try and understand how we could take what we do into the townships. And my experience of township economies has sort of been, I've always thought in terms of sort of goods and services, well, not services, goods, so FMCG goods, spaza shops, shebeens. If you look at the book that G.G. Alcock wrote called Kazinomics, he talks about all of those things. And well, for myself, when I thought township economy, I wasn't thinking about the gig economy or tech or any of those things. And so we started looking around at seeing how we could make a difference. And Andy spoke about these tech hubs and how we could do things a little bit differently. Of course, COVID came along and accelerated all of those things. And suddenly we needed to move our entire workforce to a work from home environment. And in a lot of developed countries, it was a relatively simple issue. For us in South Africa, there were the complexities that there's no hard fiber in a lot of township areas. So what Tim and Vuma did has been amazing in terms of taking hard fiber. It was mainly, mobile broadband that we're accessing. And then, of course, there's the issue of load shedding. Now, load shedding in most areas of South Africa, you can set your watch by it. You know that load shedding is going to run from 8 to 10. And what we do is we'd get our workforce schedulers to schedule agents to work within those times, and we'd work around the load shedding schedule. The only problem is that in townships, sometimes the power goes out for 3 or 4 hours and it's not scheduled. And what we found is that we'd have agents in the middle of a peak shift for the US, let's say, and there was a 4-hour power failure, and all of a sudden we couldn't work around that. And that made us get creative, and that's, I think, what we really do well in South Africa is we get creative. Problems come up and we solve them. We work together with a tech company, and we developed a UPS. I know UPSs are ubiquitous, but we developed a uniquely homegrown solution called the Meerkat. It's a little unit that'll power a tower, 2 screens, and a mobile dongle for about 4.5 hours with all the different connections. And what we were able to do then is that we did a study, and most power failures in the townships generally don't last longer than 4 hours. And what we were able to do was work through those. Something else that happened during COVID was I was lucky enough to get up to a game lodge just outside the Kruger Park near Hazy View. This was sort of towards the end of last year, and being completely fascinated by what people do in rural areas in terms of jobs, and that I was introduced to an NGO called the Good Work Foundation. It's an NGO that's been going for, I think, almost 15 or 20 years. They have a work readiness program, which is very similar to what Harambee do. They have a number of campuses around the country, based in rural areas, in the communities. And what I was fortunate enough to be invited to go and have a look at their campus in Hazy View, which is situated in the township, in the community, just outside the town of Hazy View. And what I saw there was this unbelievable work readiness program. They were producing skilled people that could go out and work, and they also had a contact center program. And in fact, on a very small scale, they were doing some outsourced contact center work. And that's where the discussion started with them. And we started sort of brainstorming and seeing what we could do in terms of taking what capability BPO does as a business and taking that into the Hazy View community. And one of the biggest things for Good Work Foundation and what was happening in that community, and I know it happens in communities all over South Africa, is that you've got this deep and rich talent pool, but there are no job opportunities. And what happens is that all that labor gets exported to the urban areas, like, well, for Hazy View, that people would specifically migrate to Gauteng to look for work. And sure, people go to Gauteng, they work and they send the money back, but there's a huge portion of what they earn that's spent on getting them to and from work when they live in Johannesburg or Pretoria, let's say, and another big portion is spent on accommodation. And what we wanted to do with Good Work is establish a facility in that community where the talent stayed in the community, all the benefits that went with that stayed in the community, the salaries paid stayed in those communities. And I'm really happy to say that at this point, we've moved past the concept phase. We're now in the planning phase, and the plan is by the end of Q1 next year, we're probably looking around April or May, so early Q2 or end of Q1, we're hoping to have a 100-seat facility with agents delivering BPO services or GBS services into South Africa. The plan is to take that facility and expand it to a 200-seat facility and hopefully eventually deliver services offshore. Initially, the plan was to start trying to find work for the facility offshore, but what we did is we thought it would be strategically better if we first started delivering locally and then started looking to expand the footprint into delivering services to either the UK or to the United States. Some of the problems that we've encountered is obviously there's no hard fiber into that community. So the Digital Council have actually been assisting us. One of the problems is that there's a river that needs to be crossed. So if you look at where the fiber runs, it literally runs up to properties that border the river. We've got to now get it across the river into the community. And there are a whole lot of planning permissions that we need to get and quite a lot of bureaucracy. And fortunately, we have the Digital Council helping us. And if you look at the spin-off of just getting fiber onto that campus, what we're then going to do is we're going to bring hard fiber and bulk broadband into that community. And that, again, starts unlocking a whole lot of other things in terms of, I think, Andre, it was you that spoke to the cost of mobile data. Suddenly, we're going to bring that cost of data right down. There are a whole lot of spin-off industries that we see developing around our facility. And we're already looking, Good Work already do sort of school programs where they help kids develop their science and math skills. And we're looking at how we can further develop that. We've been talking to other NGOs like We Think Code in terms of how we can take what they do, and instead of just offering what we think code does in big centers like Cape Town or Johannesburg, but looking at establishing a sort of a micro campus in Hazyview. And of course, the availability of cheap broadband facilitates all of those things. So I'm really massively excited at seeing what we can do, and exactly the same as what Harambee have been doing and what Tim and his team have been doing with their 20 agents in Jabulani and in Soweto. We hope that what we can do is almost create a template for other facilities of its kind around the country. And obviously, Hazyview, one of the industries we're looking to tap into is the whole tourist industry with the Kruger National Park and all of those lodges around there, is looking at providing GBS services to the South African national parks, to those lodges, and just looking how we can unlock opportunities there. Andrea, I think that's that's pretty much talking to what we're hoping to achieve.
Excellent, thanks, Mark. I love the construct of the one hop to get to work. That really made a lot of sense. And I also like this the way you've now taken what we discussed earlier, being a township, into a more rural area. I think it's very important in the South African context to really bridge the digital divide. There's so much talent, as we know, that doesn't have to be in Gauteng, Durban, or Cape Town. It's sitting there ready to tap into. I also quite liked your the way you solved the problem in terms of the UPS. So that speaks to further beneficiation. You know, we're a tech company ourselves, and what we're trying to do with our techies is to give them this opportunity density. We're saying to them, you're an electrician, you're a fiber technician, but there's solar, there's so many different things, and we in this country can leverage that, and those technicians can support centre like yours, or even the general residents around them, because as we know, the power in this country isn't that reliable, and you can't afford to be on a conference like this or having a meeting with someone in the US or Asia or somewhere and the power lights go off. It just doesn't work. So thank you very much. That really does add value. Guys, the floor's open. Anybody want to throw some questions out or pick up on what's been said?
I think, I mean, I've had lots to say. Maybe I'll say a little bit more, but you know, the idea of bringing the gig economy to these township and rural communities really excites me. As I said, you know, when I thought of township economy, sort of what springs to mind is informal traders and you know, sort of non-permanent, transient kind of setups, and what we're doing is we actually taking the gig economy to the townships.
How are we going to scale this thing? How are we going to get to that critical mass? Because we need thousands of jobs, and I can see it's, you know, in concept, but what else do we need?
You're on mute, Tim.
Sorry about that. I'll try and give a bit of an answer there. It's two years into COVID and I'm still on mute. Anyway, look, I mean, these are, and I truly believe in these sort of lean approaches to problem solving. My techie and you know, what Mark's been talking about. When I spoke about that moment in time where we actually worked very closely with Andy and his team at Bepesa, when the Minister of Health sent 70%. There was a special dispensation to at least leave 30% in the BPO operators, but 70% of the people had to go home. And you know, it was within that sort of moment in time that the sort of solutions popped out. The funny part was, and Mark said it quite well, we don't have the same solutions that an established market or a first world sort of country has. You know, not just within the townships, but we can't just sort of switch things over to a work from home environment. So we really had to rally around trying to work out how best to do it. And I think it's within, you know, those sorts of partnerships that we're going to need to you know, really think about how to do this. And I'll just give a few examples. We know that the models work. We know that we can put people, we can get people to work from home. We know that they work on small sort of scales. We also know that the centralized operating models of some of these BPO operators and tech, for example, tech, which also fit nicely, they rely on sort of centralized services. So we not just work from home, we've got to think about enabling hubs, as Mark was saying as well. And if we think about how we are growing in some of these circumstances because of foreign demand, we've got to really focus in on the demand side so that we can catalyze all of that, so that we've actually got the demand for the sustainability that I keep on harping on about. If there's no commercial model, we can fund it for a small amount of time and it'll all go away. The talent, I think, funnily enough, the nice part here is that the talent is good. The talent can be upskilled in certain parts of this thing very quickly. Funding, there's no shortage of funding. So it's all about getting the demand in there, rallying as an you know, as a country, being competitive and but at the same time being cooperative, and really trying to catalyze all of that demand into these places where we shoot the lights out. We compete globally with the likes of India and other places, and we start to grow these services into South Africa. So I think for me, it all starts with that demand side, and making sure that the rest of the world knows, number one, what we can do, what we're capable of, but number two, that we can deliver as a number one destination. And I think it all starts with demand for me.
Mark, you want to weigh in there?
Thanks, Andre. Yeah, I just want to build on what Tim said. So I think it's very much focused around the demand. I think what organizations like Harambee and Bapesa have done exceptionally well is create a really deep talent pool within South Africa. You know, you can have massive numbers of unemployed people, but if they don't have the skills necessary, well, then they're always going to stay unemployed. And I think there's some really great there's some really great programs out there in terms of providing us with talent. So we don't battle to find talent. And in terms of demand, I think if South Africa could harness, and this is just a thumb suck, Andy will probably keep me honest, but if we could harness 10% of the demand coming out of just the US, I think we'd create hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs. And again, if we look at what's been done in India and the Philippines, there's no reason why we can't do the same in South Africa. And just the last thing is, you know, the perception I had, and sort of it was reinforced slightly, was that if you were bringing big BPO or clients into South Africa, they'd only want to go into a major hub. But when we started scratching the surface a little deeper, if access to the facility was relatively easy, in other words, you didn't have to put someone in a 4x4 and take them through the jungle for 5 hours. You could put them on a plane and then a smaller plane and they'd be there. People, the clients, the buyers from overseas are prepared to do that. And that's another thing. There are a lot of, I think, and this is my humble opinion, that there are a lot of negative stereotypes about why we can't do things. And I think we should focus on why we can do things. And yeah, I don't want to get into too many cliches, but that was just what I wanted to add to what Tim had to say.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Look, I'm cognizant of time. I see we've almost right at the end of it here. Andy, are there any closing comments that you'd like to end off with?
Andre, I think, you know, listening to what Mark and Tim have said, your opening comments, and, you know, what I'd like to close with is that, you know, coordination, collaboration around really, you know, getting into the township economies with the proven solutions and their different formats that we've seen with organizations like yours that understand that world well. It needs a concerted, coordinated effort now to match demand to the supply, like Tim was saying. And it need not be limited to one sector like ours. It should be across the different sectors. But this needs to be given a priority. It needs to be given focus. It needs to be coordinated, so that you can start to deal with some of those issues, the practical examples, like Mark mentioned, just getting through the red tape and the bureaucracy that slows things. A simple thing, connecting point A to point B shouldn't be such a problem. And if you look at all the things that have been discussed, the geolocation of people, closest to your areas of work, etc., everything's there to be able to get this right. And perhaps to get the scale into it and catalyze that growth that you were talking about is going to be just more coordination of the role players like yourselves who can make this happen and do that across the country. So I feel that it's now more about the coordination in the organization and prioritizing the dealing with some of these unnecessary obstacles than it is about the willingness to unlock value in the township economy. That's there. It's now just moving these models forward and really kind of breathing scale into them as quickly as possible. So it's an exciting opportunity, but that's why, for example, in our world, we partner with Harambee, we partner with the DTRC, we partner with the Digital Council, and it's about bringing all those role players together who can play their part in these sort of solutions. And the capabilities are there, the wherewithal is there. You've heard the funding is there, the technologies are there, the talent pools have always been there. So yeah, I think in closing, just to coordinate, prioritize, and kind of do this at a more of a cross-sectoral approach as well.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think you summarized it pretty well. The green shoots of opportunity are there. You've mentioned all of them, the talent pool, the coordination that's required, the funding, all of that. So definitely, I think the prognosis going forward is good. I get a sense that this pandemic is winding its way down. We've suffered a bit from the semiconductor shortage, which has hit us worldwide from an equipment point of view. I see that also is going to slowly wind its way out. And I'm seeing a better light at the end of the 2022 tunnel. I think next year is going to see a tsunami of growth. Anyway, that's my point of view. But guys, thank you very, very much for your contribution. I see we have run out of time. It's been really enjoyable hearing your points of view and engaging with you on the subject. So thank you all very much, and wish you all the best and a safe trip, Mark, to the Netherlands. And I think that's it. Take care. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Andres. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we trust you enjoyed the session. Thank you to all our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this event to you. Please click on the next link to join the following session.